I'm here today with Reverend Ann Kansfield. Ann is the author of a new book titled Be the Brave One, Living Your Spiritual Values Out Loud and Other Life Lessons. Ann was voted the inaugural New York Times New Yorker of the Year and is the first female and openly gay FDNY chaplain. A graduate of Columbia University, Ann followed the Ivy League crowd to Wall Street until 9/11 happened, and she realized she wanted more from life. In addition to her FDNY chaplaincy, she serves as co-pastor of the Greenpoint Reformed Church in Brooklyn, New York, with her wife, Reverend Jennifer All. So, Ann, it's so wonderful to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, it's just great. You and I had a wonderful conversation, before the interview, and I really was glad that we've connected. We know so many people in common and so many other, good stories. So thanks so much for that. So first of all, I have to ask, what exactly does it mean to be the New York Times New Yorker of the Year?
You're like starting off with the, with the biggest question around. Because I tell the story in the book, but in my opinion, it's one of the most hilarious stories that you can possibly have. Because it sounds like really epically amazing, right?
It does.
New York Times New Yorker of the Year. And all it took was I think 80 votes max. But it was an addendum at the very bottom of the morning news roundup. So we're talking maybe 0.01% of all readers of the New York Times might have actually read the segment announcing this, vote for the New Yorker of the Year. And in it, the author had given a couple of, nominations as ideas. So Donald Trump, Lin-Manuel Miranda, the New York Mets, Pizza Rat, and Ann Kansfield. And the reason why I was mentioned at all was because the woman who was writing the piece had just started at the Times when she was assigned to do a profile about my being named as an FDNY chaplain. So, and we all remember our first article or the first sermon we preached and whatnot. So she put me in, and I don't think that Lin-Manuel Miranda had any idea that this was happening, and Pizza Rat's dad lacks opposable thumbs to be able to vote for him. But Ann Kansfield had a bunch of friends and family members who she immediately texted and emailed and posted and was like, "Hey, vote for me in this little known, obscure, made up competition to be the New Yorker of the Year." And wouldn't you know that I finally, having run for student body president in the 6th grade and the 7th grade and the 9th grade, I finally won.
Oh my goodness! Oh, that's
yeah.
great. So
and now it can be written anywhere. Everybody will know I'm the New Yorker of the Year.
It's on your resume permanently.
Permanently. Just remember, I was I think it was 80 votes. You also had to make a Times profile, which was extra complicated. You couldn't just click a radio button to vote. And make a profile.
There you go. So I know there's lots of good stories, that you can tell us, but another one I want to hear is what was it like to be on Wall Street and make a transition away from that into what you're doing now?
Well, I think it was a helpful experience. I loved the market. I love business, in part because it's really competitive, and right where you stand. This is not. There's no subjectivity to it. You either make money or lose money, win or lose. I mean, it's great because there's no. It takes all of the gray area out of anything, right? And I also really
world, as we all know, right? I used to be an engineer. I like the same thing. Ones and zeros, very black and white.
Right, ones and zeros, black and white.
That's not really.
And I mean, some days in church, I just wish I could get a report card from God. Just let me know, how am I doing? Please give me the report card. But in the moment when I left to go and work on Wall Street, I had no idea what it involved. I was actually just told by a friend to go for an interview, and he dressed me up in a suit and he gave me a fancy pen and and like just told me what to say, and I went and I did it and I got the job. And it was an excellent, foray into the working world and to get to see what that was like. And I think that after I was really more of a liberal arts major and history and women's studies, like after dealing with these ethereal topics, just the ones and the zeros were really good for me for a while. And in the same way, I'm really grateful for that experience because when 9/11 happened, I happened to be on the phone with a company confirming a job interview on Wall Street. It was one of the rare times that I was actually home in Brooklyn, and a woman said, "Well, a plane just hit the World Trade Center." It was a moment that whole day, being home, not having anybody I knew around, everybody had already left for work, of just a lot of time on my hand and feeling incredibly useless. And I remember saying, like, I've never felt as useless as I felt, in the week after 9/11 as a stockbroker. When push comes to shove, no one says, "Oh my gosh, I need a stockbroker to go." And
you need firefighters, right?
Right. And so I, on the days that are difficult in ministry now, I can look back and say there's a reason why I'm not doing that anymore. And it's precisely because I wanted to do something that added meaning to other people's lives. So a week later, I called up a professor who I knew at the seminary. It was a seminary where my dad worked, so I had a certain connection there, but I was just gonna like talk about going to seminary, and he said, "Oh, you're so lucky. Classes were canceled last Tuesday, and so you haven't missed a single class. I'll pick you up at 4 p.m. and you can start today." And he didn't give me any opportunity to say no. He was just like, "I will pick you up at your apartment in Park Slope, and we will drive to class. That's it. Like, it is done."
Wow. Well, good for you. I mean, it's an amazing transition though, right? I mean, from that type of vocation to, what you're doing now.
Yeah. I mean, it was certainly a big change. And it's one where I'm just incredibly grateful for the chance to get to go and be a pastor. I mean, there's not a day where I can ever take it for granted. And then I will definitely say that when I learned about Father Michael Judge, who was the fire department chaplain who was killed on 9/11, I was like, wow, they have chaplains in the fire department? That sounds like the most cool job in the universe.
Yeah, so
I'd really like to have that job.
Tell us more about that. What is that like? What does that involve?
Well, I'll tell you. So the first couple of, probably 10 years out of seminary, I was basically like roving around looking for anybody who might be able to tell me any information about this mysterious fire department chaplain job. And then one day I met one of the fire department chaplains. He was at Union Seminary, and he was recruiting seminarians to help in his ministry. And I was like, oh. So I like instantaneously sucked up to this guy. Like, I wanted to know everything he had. And he was so kind and loving and gracious. And it turned out he's a Franciscan who actually took up Michael's work right after Michael died. So started right away. I think that night, September 11th, he was helping to make death notifications.
Wow.
And I remember coming home after meeting him that day at Union and saying to my wife, like, guess what, honey? Like, I met one of the real fire department chaplains, and I don't think I can ever do that job. Like, it's going to take 20 more years at least before I have the spiritual maturity to be able to go and be like that guy. I think we should just plan, like, I'm a small fish in a big pond, and I need to, I just need to grow a little bit more in ministry, or maybe a lot more, before I'm ready to go and do that. So a couple of years later, I found out that there was an opening, and I interviewed and got the job. And not long afterwards, I saw Chris again, and I was like, listen, I just thought, like, I don't have the spiritual maturity for this job. And he looked at me and he was like, Oh, don't sweat it. You're totally fine, Ann. Like, you know, you think it requires a huge amount of spiritual maturity? No way. We got this.
So what is it like though? What is that? What do you do? I mean, what kinds of things are you involved in?
Well, in some ways, it's definitely the opposite of like a zeros and ones. You know, there's not a really significant job description. I've tried to find one. One of my favorite lines is in the rules and regulations. There is a section that is dedicated to the chaplain that basically says you're supposed to wear your uniform properly, and that's about it.
That's the number one requirement, right?
That's the number one requirement. And I was like, wow, okay, I'll try to make sure I wear my uniform really properly. But we get called out and we respond to any third alarm or higher fire. And if a member of the FDNY is injured on the job, we get called out there. Or God forbid, if someone dies in the line of duty, we'll get called out there. I think that one of my favorite kind of mental exercises to do is to think like, oh, when Michael was a chaplain, how did he spend his time? And how does that differ from the way I spend my time? And what's changed within those circumstances? So in the 1990s, he spent a lot of time visiting FDNY firefighters in the burn unit, a huge amount of time. And amazingly, with the changes in technology, with the advent of bunker gear, I have not gotten called to the burn unit, amazingly. But instead, I spend a significant amount of time with members who are receiving cancer treatments, who are dying of cancer, and with families after their loved one that's died of a cancer. The vast majority related to World Trade Center service.
Wow. So you're right in the thick of that.
So right in the thick of it. And, you know, one day, maybe a year into the job, I came home kind of pissy, for lack of a better term, and kind of said to my wife, like, God did not make me to be a hospice chaplain. Like, this was not what I thought this job was going to be. She had worked as a hospice chaplain, and I may have said something like, you're the hospice chaplain. I'm a chaplain for the living, not the dying. And she looked at me and she said, you know, this is a season. And eventually you will not have anyone dying from a World Trade Center related illness. And then she looked at me with like very sincere, you know, compassionate eyes and said, and it's your season, Ann. So, you know, as it's an incredibly sad experience. We have a funeral this Saturday for the number 2 chief in EMS.
I heard about that. Yes.
And what happens in a situation like that is everybody who worked there is thinking, you know, that could have been me.
He sounded like he was really highly respected too.
He was really highly respected. And for me personally, it's especially hard. The chief of EMS and I are often mistaken for one another. we have a whole comedy routine about it. You know, like people will come and try to confess things to her, and she'll be like, "Whoa, I'm the chief. You want Ann? She's the chaplain." And often, like if I'm walking around in the city and somebody, you know, in an ambulance sees me, they'll think that I'm the chief, and they'll like suddenly like, oh, get a little, you know, sit a little higher and straighter and act all like they're really on the up and up. And Chief Suriel, who passed away, he and my friend Lil were best buddies. You know, like the concept of your work husband. You know, like Chris Keenan, the Franciscan, is totally my work husband, and I've like it's just really hard to think about somebody losing your best bro from work.
Yes,
is just gut wrenching.
Sure, you go through so much grieving, you know, in your job, right? I mean,
right.
It's hard, but you know, thank goodness there's people like you that are doing it.
Well, and it isn't all sad either. You know, there's an amazing benefit of being around tragedy kind of on the regular, which is that you tend to live life like, you know, like you're going 100 miles an hour. Yeah, you live life like it matters. And I mean, I've never been around a group of people who are more than capable of saying, I love you. I joke that like words are not our love language in the fire service. Like acts of service are definitely, often, like, okay, it's kind of a full sentence. but I love you is just as much or like, I hope you're okay, or I'm checking in with you, is a real gift of getting to go and serve the people that I serve. And they're just a bunch of really fun people.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I'm sure, it's got to be an amazing set of experiences. But
plus, I'll also let you in on a little secret. Like the first time I was ever driven around in a vehicle with lights and sirens, like I've never experienced like a rush of feeling so much power as like watching cabs have to go and like get over on the way where somebody's driving. It's like, wow. All I thought about was like the bullies in third grade. I'm like, look at me now.
Kind of a combination of a roller coaster and a tank or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, let's get into the book. We're supposed to be talking about your new book. I'll
let you know a secret. Almost everything that I said is probably in the book.
So, let's talk about how did this happen? How did this book happen?
So this is like the most accidental book that I think could possibly be written. I like to write reflections and post them on Facebook, not with any brilliant intention, just like experiences of ministry. Some of my friends joke with me that like, Angie, like you can see God anywhere in your daily life. And I'm like, oh, is that really what I'm doing? But I tend to be, I don't know, lucky. I have an orientation of thinking theologically about what's going on. Somebody might say that I'm like really gifted with BS. I mean, perhaps that may also be a
great trait,
right? It is one of the skills I think of ministry, like just being like, oh yeah, isn't that was interesting and notable. So I would just write up stories and observations from whatever was going on with my ministry. And over the course of this time, a bunch of my friends started, one or two, and then it got to be really annoying. We're like, oh, Ann, you should write a book. You should write a book. And I didn't want to write a book. I never thought that I could. I have a incredibly minimal attention span. So the idea of like maybe I could have written like a devotional book of like, 2 paragraphs a day.
Something really short, right?
Something really short. Yeah, exactly. Like, and people would be like, but it should be easy. You have all these Facebook posts. And I'm like, Facebook posts
easy, right? Just to
do not make a book, right?
Together in a Word document, you're done. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So then, one of my friends conspired with an editor who had helped her to write a book and said, oh, you should talk to my friend Ann. And so one thing led to another. But in the actual like getting it done, in the process, I think I really figured out that I probably have dyslexia, which makes a lot of sense of my very creative spelling. I have very creative spelling. But I realized how difficult it was for me to put kind of concepts in order, especially on a bigger level. And so I was really lucky that one of our congregants had lost his job, and like we were out for brunch, and he asked me how the book was, and I was very like, oh, I don't know, I can't get this done, I'm scared. And he's like, I want to help you write that book. And so he and I figured out how to do this just by trial and error. He's an airline executive, and so he was got an interim job in Europe, so he would fly to Europe on Monday and fly back on Friday. And in between, while he was on the airplane, he would text me and weave together, the stuff that I was writing to send to him. And but without him, there would never have been a book. So Marty St. George is the hero of Be the Brave One for sure. And he was just incredibly generous with his ability and his time. So also like really brilliant. He picked up, there was one moment where he called me, he's like, you're going to love this section that I put together. And I'm like, what? He's like, I made a really, really funny joke just in your tone. It's really the perfect, like, I feel as though I've fully made it as a ghostwriter. So we really celebrated when he didn't just get the tone, he got the tone plus the ability to make like witty jokes. Yeah, which I would say, when people have a theology of like Jesus is my friend, Jesus comes alongside me and helps me. I often sometimes wonder, like, what does that actually look like in real life? And I think it looks like having a friend who sees you like completely struggling. And I had foolishly made this promise. I had signed the contract to write the book. People are like, well, don't you know what was in your contract? I'm like, not really. I just knew I had to return it to them, and I was probably late getting it back. And so I just signed it to get them off my back, and then figured like, oh, it's not due for another 6 months, so I can put it off for a while and stop thinking about it. Which I will say is a very, puts me in good standing with the fire department, because it's either on fire or it's not a fire. There's only 2 sets of time. So there's 2 sets of time writing a book too. Like, it's either on fire or it's not on fire. So.
Well, and you had the pleasure of working with Lil Copan at Broadleaf Books too, who, I know very well, and she's a very highly respected editor.
She's brilliant. And the thing that she was so brilliant at is seeing potential in people who, like, I certainly didn't see the potential inside of me. So, and I completely blew her off, especially in the beginning. Thank you, Lil, for sticking with me. But she's sort of the publishing equivalent of like a really amazing, Major League Baseball team scout who goes around and finds the talent that nobody knows is there. So I feel, as a kid, I always dreamed of getting discovered by the Detroit Tigers. But instead, I got discovered by Lil Copan, and now, I'm on Team Broadleaf.
There you go. So if I'm not mistaken, the book does not have an acknowledgement section, which is probably a little atypical, right? I mean, what's the story with that?
Impressed you noticed that. Way to go. So I'll tell you what is up with that was I didn't quite know when it was due, number one. And number two, I realized if I started trying to acknowledge all of the people, which I probably could have written something that would have acknowledged what was going on. But this is so much of a team effort that I was so afraid of leaving somebody out, because there were so many people who have cheered me on and rooted me on, that probably the braver thing would have been to say, I have so many people to acknowledge. And instead, I just put it off and put it off and put it off, because I didn't want to, try to list them all. But I also figured there would be other times to acknowledge all. Like, I can't tell you how much of a team effort this was. Like, for everybody from like my clergy coach who worked with me, and in particular, I was like, I have to do these final edits. I hate final edits. I suck at editing. And she's like, they have a professional editor. And I'm like, yeah. She's like, you're really good at utilizing a team, man. Why don't you just trust the editor? I was like, I can do that? Yeah, what a concept. So like, I just hit select all and submit, and it was good. Like, it was great. And I had a friend who I was really worried about accidentally saying something insensitive or, rude or mean-spirited and so I had a friend who was a sensitivity reader, and and caught some really great catches.
That's the whole idea, right? It's the things that you're blind to, somebody else.
Right. And the other thing that I'm also like, I woke up this morning. In general, I'm a very anxious person. So I hope anyone can appreciate the irony of this title. Right? It's all smoke and mirrors. It's all smoke and mirrors. But the title is like, really, really ironic, because I've been so blessed by people who have helped me to learn to be brave about writing this book. So this morning I woke up and I was like, oh no, who have I mentioned in the book? And do I need to make sure they get a complimentary like copy inscribed to them? And how am I going to go and find all the people? And then how am I going to get all of their addresses? Like, so yeah, so my neurotic fear of leaving anyone out can easily keep me from doing things like having acknowledgments.
So who's the book for? You know, who do you recommend, read this?
Oh, that's a really brilliant question, because it's kind of twofold. I mean, I think that if it's gonna get to the people, so I hope that I wrote it for people who are like, religion and faith is not necessarily for me, but I might be interested to see what it might look like in a way that I haven't seen before. But in order for those people to actually get to see the book, like it's going to have to get enough publicity among probably the more traditional spiritual memoir readers before it kind of makes its way out to the general population. But I'm really hoping it's going to be people similar to the folks who are in our congregation, who are surprised to be in church, who are surprised to be at all intrigued by God, who are surprised to find themselves giving prayer a chance, or connecting with spiritual values. I really love people who are, or am more intrigued with people who are like spiritually curious and not locked into a dogma. So, but I was super surprised this past weekend. I was asked to do a retreat for middle schoolers. So it was a bunch of Presbyterian churches who bring their middle school youth groups to a camp in New Jersey, and really it was a frenemy who suggested that I do this. Like, I mean, would a friend throw you to the wolves of middle schoolers?
Really?
I'm not sure, right? And I went, and so we designed this around storytelling and talking about, our story and God's story. And like the joke was on me, because I didn't think middle schoolers were going to be into it. And instead, like, they loved it. And I didn't ever think of myself as somebody who would really love connecting with middle schoolers. Like, I've always just kind of been scared of them, like ever since I was in middle school. And it was great. So like, if middle schoolers seem to like the book, and they really did. I had a kid who, like, I was down to my last, I only brought one book because I only had one, because my wife jokes that it was a little on brand that I just keep giving them away to people. Like, and the kids were like, "You're just giving them away?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I mean, we didn't really do this to make money. We did this, for God. So yeah." Well, so this one of the kids like chased down my son, who's 13, and he was like, "Hey, Harry, here's $12. It's all the cash I have. Can you go and get that copy of the book from your mom? I really need it."
Oh my goodness.
And I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that this kid did. And then I look over in the night like worship service, and there he is, like secretly reading the book, and he wouldn't put it down. And I was like, "No way! Like, I must be dreaming this."
You've got a new fan base.
I have a new fan base among the 12 to 15-year-olds. Yeah. So
get the pastor that does the Dungeons and Dragons youth group that you were telling me about. Get him to promote it to his group, then
right,
skyrocket.
It'll skyrocket, So I mean, I don't know what your usual the authors that you interview, their usual audience are. I hope that it's folks who would be surprised to find themselves maybe even reading a book. Like I find myself like, wow, I'm surprised I'm reading this, and sort of just surprised by the ability to connect with the stories. I think they're pretty universal in terms of some of the themes there, and the characters are just wonderful folks. Like, the kids at this youth group got me telling stories that are in the book, and it was the characters just come alive. So, because they are very alive, the folks in Greenpoint are totally alive.
What one thing would you hope that people who read it take away from the book?
Oh, good question. I mean, I would say that the real thesis is that if you can take the time to name your own values and then work on trying to live them out, both in the success and the failure, that you live a more fully alive life. And that living a fully alive life is like, just means having adventures and meeting people and doing things that you'd never imagined doing. So I never imagined that our little church would grow and be a really active congregation. I never imagined that I'd really get to go and be the fire department chaplain. and I certainly wouldn't have imagined that they would actually want me. I mean, I think for the first several years of my time there, I was trying to sort of replicate the pre-existing, especially sort of Catholic chaplains. And one day I asked a colleague of mine, like, for some guidance on something. And she's like, Ann, we didn't pick you because we needed another one of them. We picked you because we needed you in all your eccentricity and authenticity. So like, don't try to be anybody other than yourself. It's still a lesson that I'm, practicing.
But excellent advice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that God picks you to be you, whoever that is.
Yep. Yep. For sure. For sure. So since you enjoyed this writing experience so much, I mean, have you got any ideas for, 5 more books that you're going to come out with?
Well, there was a moment earlier in the year on Facebook where I asked people about what activity that they see that might be associated with some religious thing that might be called Christianity. Like, what Christian practice, let's say, have you witnessed? And would you be interested in knowing the theology behind it? And so I just asked this as like an open-ended question, because really, like, especially for Protestantism, it should all trace back to something in Scripture and to our theology. And I got, like, it was one of the most commented on posts. There were probably over 100 different comments of like everything from why potlucks to, which was, I thought, pretty great. Why light candles at the beginning of services, why a red door on some churches. So I immediately called up Marty and I was like, hey, Marty, I got this idea for a book. I think we should do 100 different, weirdo things that we see Christians doing and try to plot their theological beginnings. Anyway, I don't know if that's, quite as exciting as it could be. But
I think there'll probably be a whole bunch of stories around that, right? That you can tell.
Right. I mean, the things that the choices that people make, there's a reason why we make them. It's grounded in something. So
whether it's rational or not, I mean, it comes from somewhere, right?
Right. And the practices that we do, yeah, it's a bit of form following function and function following form. Mm-hmm. But I love thinking about those things in life.
Yes. Yes. Good.
So there could easily be a second book of similar adventures and misadventures, I'm sure.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad.
One of the things that I was super excited about is my friend Kevin Shea, who's a very well-known firefighter in the 90s. He made a very daring rope rescue that happened to be caught on video, and he writes for Fire Engineering magazine.
Whoa, there we go.
Whoa, right? Yep, Fire Engineering. It's like the People magazine of the fire service. And so Kevin is going to go and review the book for Fire Engineering magazine, right?
All right.
And in the process, I was like, you need to meet Marty, because he's like, I don't know. I owe them another book, like a tactical guide to how to do, like a very kind of an engineering book, right, is what he's supposed to be writing. And I mentioned this to Marty, and Marty's like, oh my gosh, I'd love to help him write that book. Like,
oh, that's great. Marty's got a new side job, doesn't he?
Marty's he's an incredibly gifted writer and with a really interesting and brilliant theology. So,
well, when he retires from his day job, he's got a great second career, it sounds like.
Yep. And he's similar to you in that he he really loves the church, and he was raised Catholic, and I think he probably would have easily been a minister. So I think that he has certainly has a calling, and this is really, it's a calling to go and help people to write books and to find their voice, and it was the most fun. Like, I can't believe I'm actually saying that now that we're done. It wasn't so fun getting to the, getting to this point, but now I feel it's like, it's like a roller coaster,
Well, now that you're through it, and you're past it, you can look back and
let's do this again.
I can do that. I mean, before you go through it, you never know, right? I mean,
right.
Is this going to work or not? Is this going to happen or not? But, once you're through it, that's, it's great that you look on it positively.
Well, and it's also like one of, like, let's get in touch with some of your deeper insecurities. Like, I mean, I'm dreading the idea of like reviews that people could post on Amazon. Like, what if they say horrible things? And in that case, like, I've been really grateful. A group of friends of mine who have been my friends since 5th grade, when we were all in 5th grade together, and we have this group text going on that we've had throughout the pandemic, and they all got the book and were like, oh my gosh, can you believe this is great, and I'm like, guys, I'm just really afraid of when it comes out, like, what are people going to say? And they were like, just shut up and relax, Anne, it's good.
And don't pay attention to any negative reviews. That's
never read the comments. Never read the comments.
Authors should know. Just don't just ignore it. So again, the book is Be the Brave One: Living Your Spiritual Values Out Loud and Other Life Lessons. There we go.
See, look, I even came prepared.
Yay!
Yay!
So it's available from Broadleaf Books and everywhere else where books can be found. Anne, thanks so much for
thank you
with us to talk about this. It's really great to get to know you, and I really wish you the best of luck on the launch of this.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it, and thank you to your watchers and listeners who have participated in listening to our conversation. I'm
sure they're going to enjoy it. So
I sure hope so.
I'm sure they'll tell us. But in any event, thank you again, and hope to hear back from you when the next book's ready.
Thanks so much. I appreciate your vote of confidence.
All right, Anne. Thank you.
You got it. Thanks.